Alright, so I want to talk about healthcare. I'm sure some of you have heard of the drug called Daraprim. It's a preventative drug for malaria that is also used to treat infections for protozoa for HIV-positive patients. This drug is listed by the World Health Organization as the essential medicine for basic healthcare systems. This drug was originally sold for $13, but then Turing Pharmaceuticals bought this drug and raised the price to $750. Which leads to my major claim, which is that America's healthcare costs are too high. Well, again, what I'm going to be talking about is the United States healthcare system, the cost of hospital bills, and the cost of pharmaceutical companies' drugs. Cost of pharmaceutical companies' drugs. My first claim is that the United States spends the most on healthcare in the world at $8,508 per year, but we do not meet the same standard of a lot of first world nations. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which is an international group of 34 nations, found that the US has 2.4 physicians per 1,000 people. The average of the OECD is 3.1 physicians per 1,000 people. The US also has 2.6 beds. The US hospitals also have 2.6 beds per 1,000 people compared to the average, which is 3.4 beds per 1,000 people. They also looked at life expectancy of birth from 1960 to 2010. They found that the US life expectancy rose to 9 years. But when they looked at Japan, they found that in the same time period, life expectancy is 15 years, and then the average for the OECD is 11 years. In 2014, the think tank group Commonwealth Fund, which is a nonprofit organization that studies healthcare systems throughout the world, compared 11 nations' healthcare systems, which were Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. They did the ranking of the healthcare system based on quality of care, rate of effectiveness, safety coordination, patient-centered care, and costs of related problems, timeliness of care, efficiency of care, equity in health, and healthy lives. They ranked the United States of America dead last at number 11, while the United Kingdom is ranked number 1. And as I stated before, we spend the most on our healthcare at $8,508 per year, but we're ranked dead last by this organization. United Kingdom, which is ranked number 1, their citizens spend $3,405 per year on healthcare. My next claim is going to be hospital bills, which is specifically there's a high cost on hospital bills and there's a lot of variation from hospital to hospital for the same services. ABC News did an investigation on Northside Hospital, Cherokee in Atlanta and compared a hospital bill of a patient to the catalog of one of the largest hospital suppliers in America. They looked at a blood pressure pill called clonidine, which is sold by this hospital supplier for 3 cents a pill, or roughly 100 pills for $2.75. This hospital charged patients for this pill $15 a pill. IV bag filled with fluid was sold by this hospital supplier for $1.17. Hospital charged patients $148.50 for the same IV bag. Sterile water by the supplier was sold for $1.16, while hospitals charged $6-7. Not all hospitals charge patients to this extreme. However, there is a high variation of costs from hospital to hospital. Washington Post found that hospitals in the same city or neighboring counties have varied costs for the same treatment. They found that George Washington University in Washington, D.C. had the average bill for a patient on a ventilator, which is the machine used by patients that are physically unable to breathe. And he saw that this hospital charged $115,000 for this service, while Providence Hospital, which is located in Washington, D.C. as well, for the same service, charged $53,000. Washington Post also found that the city of Los Angeles has the highest variation of costs from hospital to hospital. Using the ventilation example again, they found at the lowest, ventilation service costs $78,000, and at the highest, $273,000 in hospitals in Los Angeles. My last claim is the cost of pharmaceutical drugs in the US compared to the rest of the world. According to American Association of Retired People, 80% of drugs prescribed in the US are generic, so you'd assume that the drugs' prices are relatively low. This is not always the case. Generic drugs are supposed to be adding competition and lowering prices. The average price of a generic drug for a chronic condition is over $280, which has not changed since 2012, showing that generic drugs are not lowering prices as effectively as assumed. Pharmaceutical companies have also been hiking up the price of generic drugs. Doxycycline, Hyclate, which is a generic antibiotic drug, In 2013, you could buy 500 pills for $20. In 2014, they hiked up the price, where 500 pills now cost $1,849. Glycopyrrolate is a generic drug as well that is used for surgery to lower the heart rate. 10 vials cost $65 in 2013, but in 2014 the price has risen again, and 10 vials now cost $1,277. Reason for increase in some generic pricing is due to the elimination of competition, with generic drug companies merging and acquiring one another, lowering competition and allowing them to hike up the price of these generic drugs. According to PBS, brand name patent drugs are 50 to 60% higher in the US than in France. And compared to United Kingdom and Australia, it is twice as high in the US than it is in these two countries. In 2013, PBS did a survey and found that 1 in 5 US adults did not fill out the prescription or skip doses because of the cost of medicine being too high, compared to Germany, Canada, and Australia, which they found only 1 in 10 did not fill out prescription or skip doses because of the cost. So in conclusion, as you can see, we spend the most in healthcare around the world, but compared to a lot of first world nations, we're ranked really, really low. And we have really high variation of costs from hospital to hospital. And although we have the highest number of generic drugs in the market in the US, does not necessarily mean that it's the most affordable. Thank you.
All right, well, the proposition's identified, but I'm not exactly sure there's controversy on the issue of whether or not healthcare is expensive, or that it's more expensive here than it is anywhere else. You've got a lot of information that documents that throughout the presentation, and I don't know that anybody would dispute that it is expensive. The question is, why is it that expensive? You've got one answer that you make on the third point, which says there's a lack of competition. Other than that, I'm not exactly sure what the inference is that I'm supposed to draw from this. If there's no correlation between how much you spend and how healthy people are, then maybe you could make the argument that says that spending on healthcare is irrelevant to the quality of the healthcare. I think that might be an interesting inference to make. Or you can make the argument that the system that we're operating under encourages these costs, or provides for it, or there's a lack of regulation or something along those lines, and then you're making an inference. But as it is, it seems like I'm getting a lot of factual data that's being presented without being given the inference that you want us to draw from that data, and I think you need to do a little bit more in regard to that. The secondary points aren't really previewed, but you do indicate them as you go along, and sometimes they're not phrased as claims. Again, they are just descriptive pieces of data, so you want to be careful about that. The strongest part of the argument is the information that you've got. You've got a lot of data that's applying here. You've got a huge number of examples that you're using to illustrate the discrepancies in costs. I thought you did a good job with that. There's some statistical information about average costs in different countries. I thought that was effective, and also because of the variations in costs in even localities, I thought you did a good job on that. There's some opinion evidence, but not as much as there was on some of the other issues when it comes to like statistical information. I thought you were very good at citing the sources for all of your information, so that was solid. You also seem to know the subject, and you were pretty effective at speaking to the audience. So I think that you're doing a good job on the presentation aspect, even though it's a little bit rushed. It's kind of a data dump that we're getting here, and I think we need a little bit more inference in the argument. All right, thank you.